Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. My name is Amir. For today's episode, we got Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And we also got Ernest. You can find him at Miami Heat Talk. And joining us once again on the show is Alex from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. How are you doing today, Alex?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, man. The last time we talked was 4 months ago. I think it was right before the play-in tournament and the playoffs. And we all know how last season panned out, which was not great. But this offseason wasn't much better, and it's been a super long offseason, and thank God it's almost over. We didn't have any Dame watch or any like players speculated to joining the Miami Heat, so pretty slow, long offseason. And we're getting close to training camp and media day. I think we're like a week away. Again, thank God. So hopefully we'll have some more things to cover soon. So Alex, I know there's a lot of questions the Miami Heat need to answer
hmm
during this training camp, whether that's around Jimmy's motivation, how is Kelel and Kashad and some of these undrafted players going to fit into the system? And of course, injuries. We know Jovic had a fracture, and then Terry Rozier was just cleared to play. Duncan looks healthy, which is good. But I wanted to start off with who do you think is going to be the starting lineup? I know that's not the most important question, but there was a report or article a couple weeks ago saying that there's like probably 2 guys that are guaranteed to start, which we
Yep.
can obviously assume that's Jimmy and Bam. So there is going to be a competition during training camp. So my question to you is, who do you think will start? But also, more importantly, who do you think is going to be a part of like the 9-man, 10-man rotation to begin the season with? Who do you think Spo is going to trust for that as well?
So for the starting lineup, and yeah, shout out Ethan for I think he was the one that put that on our Discord, which of course I'm gonna shout out here. Check out our off the floor Discord server. It's in the link to all of the 5 on the floor episodes. Excuse me, it's in the description of all the 5 on the floor episodes. And yeah, I thought that was a very interesting fact, or not fact, just kind of nugget, that he put out, because it feels like whoever he heard that from is almost trying to be like politically correct in a way where it's like it's not in stone, right? Because these guys can lose their spots, but I feel like we all kind of know, right, who the starters are if everybody's healthy. I feel like maybe you guys disagree with me because I'm open to other starting lineups. I'm not saying this is exactly what I want, this is what it needs to be, nothing like that. It just really feels like they're headed for Terry, Tyler, and Jovic starting next to Jimmy and Bam. We didn't really get to see it last year. I think I have that the amount of time they played together in here somewhere, so I can get that. But it was a very small amount of time, and so I feel like because of that, they're gonna want to see it. It feels like kind of a cop out because you don't really have to pick between Terry and Tyler like a lot of people want to. I mean, want them to do. And I feel like that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna see how it looks all together, and then probably take a while, right? And of course, there's going to be injuries on the way, so there's going to be changes to the starting lineups because the Heat never have these perfectly healthy regular seasons, especially not in the Jimmy era. But I just think they're going to try it out, and we'll see what the results are. But I think they're going to try it out. I don't know if you guys disagree with me there. As far as the rotation, Jaime is of course going to be in it. Duncan is going to be in it. Haywood is going to be in it. That's already 8 guys. After that, I think Love, is going to be in it. He was such a positive for them and has been for the past couple of seasons, but I think it's a little bit different with him because I do feel like there's going to be more nights this season where he doesn't play. And we kind of saw that for portions of last season. I think it was the second half of the season where he just wasn't playing as much. And we saw like a stretch of like a month straight of Thomas Bryant, I want to say. Right. So I think those are going to be the times where you see Kelel Ware shine. But my gut is telling me that Kelel Ware is not going to be in the every night rotation just based off the history of the way that Spo has handled it before. 100% agree that he is different from the type of bigs they've had in their system before. So that's where it may differ. I just feel like based off what we saw, the way his body looks, he still looks a little bit raw to me. That doesn't mean I don't think he shouldn't play in the regular season. It's on the contrary. I want him to play in the regular season. I want him to get these reps. Now, like I'm not against him going to the Skyforce if he's not going to play, right? Like just so that he is playing for certain points and then be with the team at other points, whatever. But I think ultimately you want to see him get reps. I think you want to see Pelle Larson get reps. Maybe Kashad Johnson at some points. I think realistically, we are not going to see those guys unless other guys are out. And that's just again, like what my gut is telling me based off how Spo has operated in the past. Where it's like, I think he's just going to go for the guy who he feels is more ready to help them win games in the short term. But then at the same time, it's like Hero, Duncan, those guys had big roles from the start, right? And Duncan was around for a little bit before they played him a lot, but once he got that role, it was his, right? He was a starter. He became a starter after not being a rotation player for the first year, whatever it was, 2 years that he was here and didn't really play. So he's willing to give guys the shot if he just thinks they're better. I don't think he's gonna think Ware is better than Love, and they're obviously very different players. And I'm excited to see Ware play. I want to see him in the regular season, but something is just itching at me, telling me his role, at least in the beginning, is going to be a little bit inconsistent because I think Love is going to be playing in the beginning, and I think it's going to take a little bit for Ware to play. And I don't want that to be the case, but I also don't really want to see the double big stuff right now. As far as like having a big role, I don't think Spo does either. I think the double big stuff, if you see it with Ware, it'll probably be with Jovic over a Bam or over a Love. And I think that's where it's at right now, which makes me feel like he's going to be out of it. I think after that, I wouldn't be surprised if like Burks got that last spot over Pelle Larsson, and maybe I'm just a little bit, cynical, right? A little bit jaded from all these years. I just feel like he's going to go for the better player right now. And maybe that's what it is. Those guys, Love and Burks, are just better right now. But I want to see Ware and Larsson play because I want those guys to get reps and develop.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that too, specifically, like between Burks and Pele. And you got to assume Spo is going to go with the veteran. And of course, he's shooting 40% from three. That was an issue of ours last season. We were like 13th or 14th, which was not bad, but like traditionally we need to be a top 5, 6 3-point shooting team if we want to have a better offensive rating. And so that was my opinion as well too. I think he's going to have to go with Burks initially, but we're going to be injured. So we have a really deep roster.
Exactly.
So we know we're going to get, I mean, Josh Richardson's not even like, is he going to be at camp? Like, I don't know. Cause that's another player too, that could be in the rotation as well, ahead of Pele and the young guys.
He should be at camp. I think he will be. I'm interested to see, like, I'm sure we're going to find out how much he's doing, but I know he had surgery on that shoulder like much earlier in the summer, and it was a shooting shoulder. So I've been very like skeptical about that and if he's going to be ready for the start of the season. But yeah, it's another guy who would absolutely probably factor into that conversation we were just having about like the 9th and 10th guys. And like I could see Burks and Richardson playing, frankly, over Pelle Larsson. And I like Pelle Larsson as a pick. I mentioned him on 5 on the floor before they drafted him. After they drafted Ware, I'm like, I think I mentioned Larsson and Keshad Johnson. Not to hype myself up.
I remember that.
I get a lot wrong. But I'm just saying, like, I like these guys specifically. And I liked Ware as a prospect, even though I didn't really want him to go with the big. I like him individually as a prospect. I'm just very skeptical that they're going to have like an every night role to start with. Now, I do think Larsson and Keshad, their bodies are more ready-made. But the difference between Larsson and Burks, to me, the most as far as their play style, is Burks is a much more willing shooter. Larsson, I liked his process. I like how he's always trying to make the right play and all of that. I like how physical he is, right? That's why I think he could play. But we know how important being willing to shoot when you're a shooter is, especially for Spo. He has always mentioned that, especially with, the guys who he considers to be shooters. And I think Pelle Larsson has more to his game than that. I think he's a little bit more all around, right, than just like a straight up shooting specialist like a Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
But he's a good shooter. And so Spo is going to want him to take those shots that come to him in rhythm, the good shots. And I think Burks is one where he's been high volume for years now. He's been doing this a long time. And, before he got traded to the Knicks last year, was putting up like 12 a game, I want to say, for the Pistons. Like, this is somebody who's been there, done that. He wasn't just like at the end of a bench and then got traded to the Knicks as part of the Bogdanovich deal, was a part of that and didn't really play until everybody got hurt. And then in the second round of the playoffs, stepped up. And I say this all the time, not because I expect anything like this to happen, but it's crazy to me that he averaged 17 points per game. You know what I mean? Like after, like when being called upon, and it was a lot of guys out. So he's not going to get anywhere near that role here. But what it does show is that he's able to produce in a pinch. And that's why I think he is going to be the guy who gets those minutes. It's going to be him or Jay Rich, I think, at the end of the bench. And I think, because of my skepticism that Jay Rich is going to be ready right away, I think it's going to be Burks. And he can handle a little bit too. I don't want him handling too much, like setting people up. But he is not one of those guys where he just shoots and is not capable of putting the ball down on the floor. Now, what he does after that, it's, he's not a great finisher, but his handle is decent. So I think it's somebody that Spo will rely upon, like, just early on in the season.
Oh, yeah. And, dude, like, I actually said it on my episode earlier today. I think that this 2025 team on paper is probably the best team during this Jimmy Butler build. Adding Rozier, Hawkes, drafting Ware. To your point,
Might be the
agree.
deepest.
Yeah. To your point, I agree with some of the stuff you said with Ware. I just don't think they would have drafted him at 15 to redshirt him. I really believe, Alex, that, and Spo was on that table also. I think they looked at a guy like Ware because Bam, the last time he played power forward, who was he playing next to? Myers Leonard and Kelly Olynyk. These were guys that can hit the three. They played good next to Bam's style. I think Kelel Ware is way better than those guys. And his offensive game can actually work next to Bam. But I do agree with you. I think the beginning of the season, Spo's going to rely more on Love, kind of like what he did this year. And then, 15 games, 20 games in, you're going to see that switch. Kind of like Jovic started in the power forward. You may see a switch. But
Jovic also didn't play for a year. I know he had the injuries too, but he wasn't very good at the beginning, and then his body kind of caught up. So I feel like we might see something similar. Not exactly the same, right? God forbid, or whatever the injuries. I'm not talking anything about that, but just like in the sense of he grows into his body a little bit more, becomes a little bit more mobile, stronger core, stronger lower body, and not to mention, like upper body matters as well. So I'm not trying to like list off everything, but I just feel like a guy like that with that type of size, growing into his body more and getting those reps is going to help him so much, right? Physically and mentally, because it's like I think getting those reps, you just become smarter as a player. And frankly, what I'm worried about with the double big stuff and why I kind of said that I'm skeptical that he's not going to play that much with other bigs outside of maybe Jovic is because I'm a little bit more skeptical of the shot. True. I know he's really, he believes in his shot, but I think it's still a little slow. I think it's not bad. Like, I don't mind, like, I wouldn't mind him taking an open three. I just feel like he's not a stretch big. To me, there's levels to it where, like, Kevin Love to me is a stretch big. He is more than willing to take those shots and doesn't take like 8 a game or anything like that. But it is like, he's got a quicker release and he's just a better shooter. I got to see it a little bit more. I'm not as convinced that he's a stretch big as others are, but I think he can get there. And Adam Simon, who's straight up been like, who's been killing it the past few years, right? He got on that call right after they drafted him, that Zoom call, and told all of us in the media that he's a 3-and-D big. That was like one of the first things he said. So him declaring that was great. But then in the summer, he didn't take that many, and they used him primarily as a roller because he's a fantastic roller. Yeah. So it feels like they're going right back to where they've been with other guys, because even though he's way more dynamic than the other guys that they've kind of just used as rollers, I think because he's so good as a roller, they're going to have him play in that kind of simplified role at first. Kind of like what Bam did in the beginning. If you think he was a backup big, he was very conservative. The ball was not touching him on offense other than like, a lay down pass or a lob, right? Like dump down to the big or throw it up. And that was pretty much it. And he would, the occasional short roll passes, but that didn't really come till later on. And it's not that he didn't have it. I just think, Bam was more skilled, and Ware, I think, as far as with the ball in his hands. And even then, they still didn't really go to any of that. So I think it's going to be a very conservative role where he's screening and rolling. And I think you got to get those fundamentals right too, because like you have so much size there, you got to get that part down. Because that's everybody wants to say Derek Lively, and that would be awesome. Derek Lively was the starter on this finals team. They're not playing with Derek Lively level of spacing, right? Where it's Luka and Kyrie stucking up the entire defense, and then everything opens up. So I don't think that we don't see a lot of lobs on the Heat. It's not that Bam can't catch them or isn't athletic enough, right?
You don't think Tyler and Terry are as good as Kyrie and Luka?
Yeah, not quite.
Right.
But then that's what it is. So I feel like he's going to be screening and rolling the occasional three, but I don't think he's going to be used as a stretch big for a while.
I mean, I'm going to say it right now. I'm kind of known as the Miami Heat Nostradamus. I'm going to call it right now. There's going to be a game in December or January. Love's going to go down. Kelel Ware is going to come in. He's going to play great. And then everyone is going to jump on the bandwagon.
I could 100% see that. I'm with you.
That's happening.
I think he is going to play. Like I said, there's going to be nights. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, first 41 games, Love plays, and then he doesn't. It'll be quite that black and white. Like I think he'll play here and there. I just don't think he'll be in the every night rotation. I think he's going to play more than Larson, especially if Jay Rich is healthy. Because I just think I'm going back to I think they're going to play Burks and Richardson more than Larson, and then I think we see Ware whenever Love doesn't play. Hopefully I'm wrong because I'm not sold that the double big thing is going to work, but I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to see it for stretches during the regular season. Like this is not even a good regular season team anyway, so let's just try shit, right? Like that's where I'm at with it.
I think it's good. I think trying something different is awesome. And look, there's gonna be people out there that's gonna say, "Oh, but last year the Heat picked Jaquez at 18. He was a 4-year player from USA. His body was developed. That's what happens when you play 4 years and do it the right way." But I agree with you. I think we were deep enough to allow Ware to not just have to put him right away. Let him get size right. Let him develop a little bit more. But I never got to my question for you, Alex, and I really wanted to ask this one. I want to see what you think. No, you good, bro. We know that there's a lot of dudes on this team that can score. On any given night, a lot of these players can drop 30 on you. So my question for you, the offense moving into next season. I've been clamming for this for 2 years now. It's time to make Bam Adebayo the number one option, especially with what happened in Team USA. Preferably as the power forward, but if he's the 5, whatever. My question for you, Alex, do you think that's where the Heat may lead towards, or do you think this might be 2004 Detroit Pistons? Whoever's hot, give them the ball and let them go. What do you think?
It's actually a really tough one because I'm like trying to think it through, and I've been thinking about this in the sense of like, how is the offense going to function next season? What are going to, because we've known like for each individual player what their pet plays kind of are, more or less. There's variations, but like the things that we see the most, right? What I'm been thinking about is how do they like divvy it up, especially if like it is that starting lineup that I said that I expected, where it's Terry and Tyler together. So I'm interested to see how they do it. It makes me think that Jimmy is going to take an even smaller role in the offense, and of course, it's not what you want to see. Like you need Jimmy to be your number one guy for your team to be at its best, just frankly. And that sounds simplified, but it's really not. Like it's just been factually true. When Jimmy plays their number one option, regular season or playoffs, they're better. I don't know if we can expect it. But I do think Terry and Tyler are going to get a whole lot of touches. And I think to be fair to Tyler, I think he deferred a little bit when he did get to play with Terry, which was, again, just not very much. I don't think it didn't feel like a competition where it's like, okay, it's my turn. Let me really try to make something happen with the ball. I think Tyler was doing his best to adjust kind of in a situation where he just got thrown another, high usage guard in the starting lineup. And I thought he was averaging, I want to say like 17 or 18. Like his scoring went down a little bit because he was trying to defer and trying to play a little bit more off ball. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I think it was around there. And so I'm interested to see what they do and how often they get to Jimmy's pet plays versus how often they get to Bam's versus how often they get to Terry versus Tyler. Not to mention Jaime's another guy who's going to have a lot of usage off the bench. Like you said, they have a lot of guys they can go to. And of course, you have the Duncan Bam 2-man game, which is one of their best plays. Like, I think I'm not sure like what they give priority to. And that's why I've had trouble being like, who's going to be their number one option? I don't know that it's going to be Bam. I just don't. I think if you're talking about Bam as a number one option, where maybe he's a playmaking hub and has the ball in his hands more than anybody because of that. And, like I could see that. But if it's talking about like Bam taking the most shots, that I'm not as sure about. I'm just not. I love what Bam has shown. But I think what you got to see, for Team USA is that Bam is really, really good when he doesn't have to do that stuff as well. I think you want to see an in-between. I don't think you want to see him beat Team USA Bam because he's not playing with 10 other superstars on the Heat, right? But I think you want to see an in-between of that and what you saw at times the past couple of regular seasons where the scoring was great and he showed you that he's capable of doing that. But frankly, and it's going to sound bad, I really don't mean this in a bad way. I promise you. I don't think Bam is a proper number one. And I don't think that's unfair. I think he's shown you that he can score more. He's way more capable of scoring than what you originally thought when he first came into the league. And even, after that first year as a starter, like he's grown so much since then in this Jimmy era. And I'm really, I enjoy it. I appreciate it. I just think there's like a balance with it. And I think they relied on it too much at times especially like the first halves of the past couple regular seasons. Because then they go away from a little bit in the second half. And I feel like it seems to be, and it's fun. Now I'm thinking about what Spo said at the end of the season, where he's like, "Oh, we were trying to find a balance between three different offensive philosophies." That's stuck with me, and it stuck with me that day, and it's stuck with me since, because you can see that in the regular seasons. It's like they're trying to have different identities, and think they'll go to certain plays more for a stretch, and then other plays more for another stretch, and it happened a lot with Bam over these past couple regular seasons. So I'm skeptical that they go back to it. I think he's going to still have some of the most shots, and he's still going to take middies, but they went to it a lot, right, in those past couple of regular seasons. And I don't know. They have more to work with now. And so, I guess in an ideal world, it's a motion offense where it's very, like an egalitarian offense. I don't know how you do that. I think that's easier said than done. Because it's like, yeah, you have a lot of guys who can score and make a pass. How do you balance it out? And I think that's going to be the key for the season. It might be with Bam at the one. It might be with Bam as a playmaking hub. The Bam at the as a number one option might just be how you get through the regular season, and then maybe Jimmy is your number one in the playoffs, right? Maybe that's your blueprint. Terry and Tyler, kind of complementing, and everything else you have Jovic, Jaime, Duncan, right? But how? How do you? What is the the hierarchy? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
So where do you see the Miami Heat stacked up in the Eastern Conference? We already know that the Boston Celtics, they're not going anywhere. Then you have the Villanova Knicks, they're pretty loaded, especially at the wing depth. And then you have the 76ers, which Paul George and Joel Embiid, which, that was tampering, but, that's a whole other conversation. Then you have the 76ers with Paul George, with Embiid. They really can't stay healthy. And then you also have those bottom teams where, they might not win a championship, but the Orlando Magic, they're pretty solid. The Pacers. Then you have the Miami Heat, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that if they take the regular season seriously, which I think that's the biggest thing, we can at least be within the top 5. But where do you see the Miami Heat stacked up in the East?
If Jimmy plays a whole lot of games, I think they can be in that conversation for a top 6 seed. But frankly, I do.
But we don't even need him to play that many games. It's just effort to me. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have to give us 30 points a game, but it's about the effort.
No, you're right. I 100% agree with you. I think you saw it the most last season. And I think where it stuck out the most to me, at least, was on the defensive end. Because, to me, he's always had moments in the past where he has, deferred on offense in the regular season and doesn't just dominate the ball. But I just think everything was, at a bigger degree, I guess, this past season, where it's you would miss, I don't know, he would disappear on offense a little bit more, but I thought the defensive decline was big last season. I just didn't really feel him as a defensive playmaker the way, you had in seasons past, where he was just frankly a menace out there. He's one of the best in the league at intercepting passes and getting in the passing lanes. I didn't really feel that from him last year. So I think there's some upside there. But I don't know if that's just part of the way that he paces himself now. That's part of the regimen. It's not just offense. It's also defense. And I think that's not great. So it's I need to know what Jimmy I'm getting. If I'm getting really engaged Jimmy on both ends, and I don't mean playoff Jimmy. I just mean 22, 23 points a game with high-level defense. That's a pretty big upgrade from what they got last year, okay? I'm not trying to trash Jimmy. He was still a pretty good player. I just think it was a lower level. I just think he wasn't as good.
It's just, it's also hard to do that, though, right? Sorry.
Do you think? Hold on, but do you think then, because you said it, which we all know, and I know that Pat and Mickey, they know as well. That's why they're not going to pay him. If you're saying that we don't know what type of Jimmy to expect, how can we justify paying him, all that much money that he wants, and we don't really know what type of Jimmy we're going to get? He's possibly going to be 38 by the end of the deal. I mean, yes, you could pay players for what they did in the past, but how could we justify giving Jimmy all this money when he's not really going to be able to give us that superstar energy throughout the regular season? And we can't just say, oh, well, don't worry, we don't care what seed we are, because as you can see, we've been in the play-in twice. And I feel like taking the regular season seriously is half the battle. Jimmy Butler has been phenomenal. He's been able to do more with less, like when you look all across the NBA. But how are we going to give him all this money and he's not going to be able to give us not even a 40-point game, like 30-point game, or superstar energy or superstar, gratification throughout the regular season?
I think it's a completely fair question, and you're right that it's like, I think that's why it's been so tough for them, right? Like the fact that they haven't extended him despite all the good times and how much he blew your expectations when he first got here, blew him away, right? Like 2 finals trips, almost a third. I think that's usually something that gets you paid, especially when he was playing at that high a level. But you're 100% right. Like you can't just factor that in and weigh that over what he's going to do for you. My confusion with them and the way that they handled it, at least this summer with the extension, was kind of like the sitting in the middle. And I understand why. I'm not trying to just trash them, but I do think in a way it's like, what are you going to do now? Because the situation you were in before is not the one you're in now. And I just mean like at the start of the summer versus now, because before you could have offered him the extension, which I'm looking at the contract right now. He has a player option for next season, the one after this one, right? The idea was to add a year on top of that, which would have paid him through his age 37 season. That's not nothing. It's definitely not nothing, because we're talking about him like this now, right? That where he's been giving you less and less, and he just turned 35. So yeah, it's absolutely something you got to like worry about for age 37. But then the other thing is, now that you're not in that situation anymore with the extension stuff is done. I think they could still technically offer it to him, but his made that announcement a while back earlier in the summer that they're not going to sign an extension anymore. And so he is most likely going to decline that player option this summer, based on at least what Ethan has heard, and get into free agent. And at that point, if the Heat want to bring him back because they're impressed enough or whatever, they're probably still not going to want to offer him his full max. And you're going to have to offer him way more years. So to me, I think they put themselves in a very like particular and kind of weird situation where it's like, I don't know what they're going to do.
I know that we have to close. Look at what you just said. If we know that, and if Pat and Mickey know that, we have to trade him and we cannot let him walk out for nothing. Correct?
I get it. And I mentioned that on some of the pods. Like, I think at the very least, they have to consider it. I don't want Jimmy gone. I directly profit off of Jimmy being there and the team being better. I 100% do not want, like, I would be sad. Frank, like it would suck. Like, I think these times have been fun. Like when they get to the end there, like we didn't expect that, and it's been really fun. I would hate to see him go. 1,000%, you're right. They had to at least consider it, and I think they're not going to do it. I don't. That's what my. Other than they're not going to consider it, they're not going to trade him. Yep. I think they probably have considered. I'm sure they've talked through like different options, and maybe not. Like they're not talking with teams about like what they would get. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? But I think they've at least gone through the thought process. Like I think you've got to imagine that. And so I think at the end of the day, just to throw one in there, they're not going to do it. I think they're not going to trade him. And I think they're going to go into the summer in a very weird space, because you're like, what is he going to want, first of all? Because like, there's always been this implication that Jimmy is not going to play like through him being that old. Like he's not going to pull LeBron. He's 35 now. And the extension that he originally wanted would have got him through age 37. So how much further than that does he want to play? I think you got to consider that, and maybe that's what they're thinking is like, oh, we won't have to offer that big of a contract, but what if it's at max money every year? Then you've kind of screwed yourself over, right? Unless they're just willing to trade him. But I'm still like very skeptical. I just can't see them trading him midseason.
Yeah, the only way I could see them trading him midseason is if they're 10 and 30 something or whatever it is, like something. They have to be like a bottom team. Someone has to be
with him playing.
Yeah, that's like
it would have to be a disaster.
It has to be a complete disaster. They have to be playing as bad as the Wizards. I don't see it happening, and it's going to suck because he's going to request that max, and we're not going to be able to offer that to him.
We're going to be 27 and 25, and we're going to be right there in the 6th seed, and then we'll make a run, and then they'll be out of the play-in, and then Jimmy will go ape shit in the playoffs, and we'll all love it, and then we'll figure this out next offseason. It's the
They're gonna be
story of
back
the
in the
Miami
play-in.
Heat.
They're gonna be back in
Oh
the play.
God, don't do
what I'm
that.
I straight up, like, I think there's a chance for them to be out of it, but I'm expecting the thing because I'm not expecting a fully engaged Jimmy, maybe a little bit better, but not fully engaged. And I'm expecting their weird injury luck and how they end up having it like for weird stretches. And it's like a lot of the bottom tier guys playing and not many of the top tier guys on the team. And so I think with those things happening, they're going to be back in the play-in.
Yep.
And yeah, like I think Orlando, Cleveland, Indiana, those are the teams that you'd be looking at to pat. Maybe Milwaukee if they have bad injury luck, right? But not if they're healthy. And I don't know, man. I think KCP really solidifies Orlando. I think that helps them more in the playoffs, but it helps them in the regular season too. Like I just think they're already an elite defense. That's even better now. He's a great defender, and they already have another elite guard defender. Like they're just going to be. I think an elite defense like that, a top 3 defense, where it's just every night you're getting that. I think that's really helpful for the regular season. You saw that last year for the Magic. They were a great defense, and it got them in the playoffs. And kind of they're a little bit ahead of schedule on their kind of timeline now. And Paolo looked great in the playoffs. And then Indiana added Siakam, and they're gonna have a full year with him now, training camp. And yeah, like Ethan mentions, he maybe teams can adjust to the style or whatever. I think now it's a little bit different that you got to adjust for Siakam as well. They're going to get Benedict Mathurin back. They have young guys growing in their system, and maybe some of them will end up getting too expensive later down the line. As of right now, they've got a pretty good team, man. I think the Pacers are good. The Cavs kind of are not amazing, but they almost have like their floor is pretty good too, like regular seasons wise. So I think that all that tells me the Heat are going to be back in the play-in, unfortunately, but that's just how I feel about it. I think all these other teams getting better at the top, plus like you have like that middle class in the East kind of solidifying themselves and a lot of these teams are younger too and getting better. I think the Heat are going to be back in the play-in, unfortunately. And I hate to say this because, again, the more successful they are, the better it is for me. So I want them to be more successful, but that feels like the most likely outcome, at least.
It's hard to bet against Vegas, and they put them at 45.5 whatever victories, and that's less than last season, and that puts them at the 8th seed. But again, I don't know. I think if they're healthy, I think they could be a top 5 or 6 seed, but everything has to go right. Jaime has to have a leap. Jovic has to have that leap. Terry and Tyler have to coexist. Bam has to improve. So there's a lot of ifs, and there's other variables, though. We don't know what injuries can happen with those other Eastern teams as well, right? So someone on the Magic or Cavs can get injured. So there's a lot of variables. We'll see. But anyway, Alex, thank you so much for hopping on the show once again. Really appreciate the time. And before we do hop off, do you want to let the audience know where they can find you and just what you guys are going to be working on this upcoming season?
I mean, sorry, I feel like it went by quick just because I was talking too much. But I feel like I was just doing, I'm just trying to give my thought process the best I can, and I'm doing it in a very unorganized way. So I'm taking up too much time already, even with just this answer. But find us on 5 on the Floor, wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube as well. But I'm always going to point people towards podcasts more because it's way better for us than YouTube. And then the other thing is, like I mentioned before, check out our Discord server. The link is in the description to all of our podcast episodes, and we're going to be amping it up a little bit this season. Most of our coverage is going to be on Discord outside of the podcast, and you'll still get stuff if you're not on the Discord server, but everybody's getting it first on Discord, and you're going to be getting much more stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff that I don't even want to give away yet. One of the things that Ethan has hinted at and kind of teased is that we're going to be doing kind of like live shows on Discord as well, where we can bring fans up and they can voice their opinions. We're going to be trying to do both. There's going to be like stage shows where fans come up, and it's almost kind of like what people used to do with radio shows with call-ins, right? So we can hear from you guys, and we can also do like live shows like what we used to do with Floor is Yours, where we can be reading the comments and reading what people are saying, but it's a much more interactive experience. Outside of that, you've already got 10 chats, a bunch of different topics. You got the Heat main thing chat. You got the channel where Ethan and Leif are giving you the updates. They're giving you the stuff they're hearing. Me and Brady are giving you, our insights, sharing stuff that we're seeing on the timeline that's interesting. You've got chats going 24/7. Heat, NBA, other sports, kind of like TV show stuff. You got all types of chats going there. So it's a very immersive experience, and we're going to be doing more that we can't even talk about yet with Discord. So I definitely highly suggest you check it out. Thank you guys for having me on, though. It's always cool. I just need to get better at not talking so much. I'm still not all these years and still.
We talking Miami Heat basketball, my guy. You keep going.
Yeah, we appreciate you, man. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
And that's enough said. Yeah, buddy.